All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Beyond the Interface. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This week we're joined with Jacalin Ding. So Jacqueline is a course creator, speaker. She's reshaping the role of designers and how they can be a lot more business savvy. Jacqueline, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you, Warren, for the fantastic introduction. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, great to have you on. Jacqueline, look, for the people that don't know much about you, do you want to tell us a little bit about, your background, how you kind of got into creating courses and so on?
Yeah, sure. So without revealing my age, I'm just gonna keep it at like 15 years, but it's beyond that already. But my entire life since I started working, it's basically doing design. The very beginning, from graphic to multimedia to branding design, interactive design, environmental design, actual physical product design, advertising, social media campaigns, to experiential design, to now. I think maybe like 13 years ago is when, since the second iPhone has launched, like the second generation of iPhone, that's the moment was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to go into product. This is so much more fun over there. And I never looked back since. But it was last since 7 years ago, I started my own business, started to get into the whole entrepreneurship journey. And I realized that once I got into that whole building a business, trying to scale it, trying to deal with a lot of partnership, sales, marketing, all sorts of new knowledge about building business, I realized that experience actually changed the way I talk and share about design forever. And so that kind of led me to, ever since I wrapped up that brand business, I've been really passionate about telling designer and sharing them what I know about the benefit about business knowledge so that they can really excel their career with that little an extra feather on their hat, if you will.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think, yeah, really interesting because we'll definitely get into the business side of things. But, I think, Jacqueline, it's interesting because you started out as a designer, but you kind of moved into creating your own business. Like, what kind of sparked you to kind of do that? I know it's something that designers do a lot of, like when we talk about side hustles or, working on things on the side. But was there any motivations that kind of wanted you to really go down that route of doing something a little bit different on the side?
Yes, it was because admittedly I have a little bit of ADHD, right? So I don't know if anyone has worked with any ADHD people. We are never settled. We are always constantly like thinking about new ideas. We always get excited about new things. Slightly, the syndrome of going, oh my God, shiny new things. And so I'm never really settled with full-time job because I feel like, for me, I live in the Pareto 80-20 method, that 80% of my effort is always, of course, invested in the full-time job. And that is a learning journey for me as well. So I choose my role based on what that role is going to give me. But the other 20%, I always will invest in what kind of impact I can create. And this kind of impact is not the full-time job can give me, right? So it's a different sort of satisfaction mechanism, if you will. I'm trying to create that. And now I look back actually thinking if I wasn't pushing myself just a little bit extra than everyone else, I would never have made the impact that I'm actually proud of today. So that 20%, absolutely, that side hustle, 20% extra bit of time and effort has paid back massively, and it has contributed to build my confidence to be able to, share my knowledge and just continue to make more impact in the way that I think I can make a difference to designers out there.
Yeah, and I think I think I've definitely resonate with that, Jacqueline, because I feel like what you mentioned there about that 20% that you will never get in your day to day, right, in your current job. I think that is definitely a big motivation, and I think that's been a motivation for me as well. Like also to grow, learn, try new things, and for anyone out there, Jacqueline, that is looking to set up their own thing on the side, do you have any tips for like how to do it and balance time? Because that's also the biggest factor, right? Is like time constraints and like.
Yeah. This is gonna sound funny, but that's why I don't have kids for a start. But the second thing, this is a reality check, right? I don't want to like go dust anything crazy. Side hustle is the hustle is real, right? Like depending on what kind of business you get into. But I think for entrepreneurship, especially you're solo trying to start up something, this description perfectly summarized up the lifestyle. It's basically like you're jumping off a like high-rise building while assembling the airplane on the way down. That's what the reality of entrepreneurship and being in building a startup, because you never know what's going to happen. It's like you think you're doing really well and doing your best, but one day one thing could happen and it completely spin you off the hook. So that resilience mindset is I would say that it's probably one of the biggest lesson that I've learned over the years building business, because there's a lot of unexpected things happen. You get a lot of rejections. There's a lot of people going to challenge you, and it puts you on the spot. So how you react to those challenges, how you overcome them, has been the biggest lesson out of everything.
I think you said a lot of interesting things. And on the ADHD kind of point, I've met so many creatives kind of in the field that can have ADHD. It almost kind of feels like a prerequisite to become kind of a creative, almost like a kind of superpower. And also like on the kind of entrepreneurship side, like the benefits that actually that can bring, because it kind of gives you that kind of hyper creativity, that focus, etc. But one thing that you mentioned around, you're as an entrepreneur, you're constantly like figuring things out,
Mm.
and ultimately, whilst you're on that journey, you are having to kind of fail and then learn from those failures quickly, which is that resilience aspect. But like, was resilience something that was like ingrained in you like naturally, or did you learn to be resilient? Because that's something that also kind of comes up, is like you hear resilience all the time.
Yes.
But can you teach someone resilience, or is it just something that's innately a part of
Mm.
who you are?
I think I love this question, but do you have a whole day?
Let's go.
Okay, let's go. I mean, this is gonna sound really interesting, but really juicy, right? I think since I was little, I have been a very unconventional life. I'm just gonna keep it short. But first of all, I was born in China as a second child, and then for a lot of you guys know that it was illegal at the time. So since I was little, I had to call my auntie mom, and so had been a very different lifestyle than most people, right? And up until I was 4 year old, they're like, "Oh, hang on, your mom is actually your auntie and your auntie is actually your mom." I'm like, well, oh, so I've got two moms, yay. And so that was starting really unconventional. So I feel like that's probably ingrained in my DNA a little bit, because everyone in the family sort of just treated me as their own daughter. And I was very lucky that way. And so, and then came to Australia, was 13 years old. I did not speak a word of English. That is hardcore for a teenager girl. Grew up in a very traditional background, having to push myself to fit in the society that I have no idea what it is. So that journey is crazy as well. And but it kind of opened up to all of this possibility for me. So since I was at uni, I was just like, okay, Australia started to get too boring and too comfortable now. I want to go everywhere. I'm gonna go to Japan. I'm gonna go to New York. I'm gonna go to Canada. So between 20 to 30, I didn't sort of live in Australia. I just like went everywhere and trying to absorb like a sponge. And throughout that time, I actually felt I enjoy hardship. I feel like if you're in the 20s to 30s and your life is comfortable, you're doing something wrong. You gotta put yourself in some sort of like some sort of thing that really challenge you, makes you worry, makes you cry, makes you go, oh my god, I'm at the edge. And how do I solve problems? So I kind of really enjoy to put myself in that situation. Like when I went to Japan, I had $300. I don't know anybody. I don't speak the language. I was like, hey, but I've got two hands. I can walk. I can talk. Let's go. See what happens, right? So I think it's that mentality kept driving me forward. And as soon as I'm in like an environment where it is like so predictable, so stable, I feel stale and I'm not growing. And so I think that's something, yes, ingrained in me, but whoever that it's about how much you want it. If you really want that business, you will push yourself into the hardship, and you will create those challenges for you day to day in order to build up that resilience, because you know that you need that quality in order to succeed. So I feel like it's multiple factors. It's the willness, and yeah, you push yourself and force yourself to do that.
Yeah. And as you mentioned there, Jacqueline, I think just having a history or putting yourself in those difficult situations, builds that resilience to when things fail or things don't work out, you know how to dig yourself out, right? I love that. And I think I totally resonate with that as well. Um, so obviously, Jacqueline, with this business that you kind of launched, and you said you took a lot of learnings as you kind of went along. Um, you know, do you feel that that has helped shape you as well into a better design? Like, because obviously your course is heavily around business acumen, right, for designers. And obviously you're starting up your own business, so you're gaining that business knowledge. Do you think that there's synergies between the two there in terms of what the course material is and the learnings that you've taken actually building that your own business?
Yeah, and not just that. It's a little bit of a mix, because while I was the business I was referring to is actually the fashion label that I started it. And so, as crazy as it sounds, I'm not a fashion designer. I don't have anyone in the industry, and I'm one of those kind of person who's truly living in design thinking lifestyle. I'm like, let's just experiment and see what happens. Oh, I've got $1,000. Let's start a fashion business, and then little did you know, it's like lots of challenges later. It went up down, and during that time, I am always the kind of person going, if I was running this business, I need to do something else to learn, or contribute to my energy throughout the whole thing, because otherwise it can get very lonely. I'm sure you guys, like whoever that runs business, know it's a lonely world. So during that time, I actually worked with a lot of like startup and scaled up business founders together, to almost like as their left hand side person, or left hand side support. Coming from design, it's a bit hard to get into that position. But then I knew if I wanted to learn how to run business, I need to be closer to where the proximity of that knowledge is. And the fastest way for me to learn that is to be right next to the business founders. So I position myself closer to where all those founders hang out, either by building relationships, getting referrals. And eventually, what I have realized is when I started to work with the founders to help them, especially building up pitch decks to raise funding, that is the best journey, because I started to know what the stakeholders care about, what they see in terms of like market trends, what's going to lead into the investment possibilities, etc. All those knowledge kind of feeds back to me when I was running that business as well. And so coming from the other side around, because I was the business founder, the way I think about suggesting design for them suddenly becomes a lot more empathetic than just a traditional designer. So I actually realized myself, I'm like, I can't believe I'm saying that, but I'm telling them don't invest in design sometimes. They're like, oh, we want to build an app. We want to get this massive website going and everything. And sometimes if the more business related question you ask and dig into it, you're going to realize that what they want isn't the app. What they want is market share. What they want is actually acquisition. What they want is market awareness, right? So then that whole approach is different. You don't need to build an app to get acquisition. You don't need to build an app to get market share. So I can suggest multiple different pathways for them to achieve the goal they wanted without investing too much money in design for a start. So suddenly they would see me as a business partner rather than just someone that they hire to come and do design. So it's a very different perspective, but I wouldn't be able to do that unless I was running my own business, because I was wearing the business hat. Every single dollar you spend, it has to be well valued. And I was living through that day to day. So that came in really handy. So those knowledges together kind of just build my really unique way of approaching design. And I think you can spend so much money on an MBA course or whatever. Nothing is going to prepare you for running a business. in the weeds, right? So I was fortunate enough to not only run my business, but also work with many founders that they're very talented and that they're partner, their team as well, to get to learn from them from real life experience. Yeah.
I'm sure many freelancers are kind of shaking right now that you're advising to not use their skills for websites and apps. But it's with good reason, right? And like just to kind of like double tap on that kind of point. How do you know when? Because I'm sure there's been many people listening that want to start a business, or they have some sort of idea, but like, how do you know when you need the app or the website and when you don't? Like, so you mentioned, like, if you're going for acquisition or market share or something else, like, how do these things determine the approach? Do you know what I mean? Like, when do you need a website and when don't you need a website?
Yeah, I mean, website is a brand presence, so that is kind of low fidelity, and that should be up and running. Like, because anyone can build a website in a day nowadays, so that's kind of like low effort. So it's everything's got to do with like whatever, how much effort you put in it, and but how much you're gonna get out of it. So the I think this is such a big question, and I don't want to give too much detail because there's different business may need to approach it differently depending on the stage of the business. But let's just take startup for example. Most startup are very strapped with money and funding and time. So time is absolutely crucial for any startup, right? With that being said, if you consider they're competing with multiple different competitor in market who's like releasing new things one after another. For a startup founder, it's really kind of stressful because they feel like they want to get into the market first. They want to buy the trust for the users, so they need to get something out. But at the same time, it's kind of like using the design thinking in terms of like understanding the user, but then at the same time going, what's the goal? What's after the user? Like, what do you want after you get all of these users on board? Do you want to maybe raise funding in next January? Usually that's a lot of the the purpose for startup, because they want to get to a point where they can position themselves going, we are winning the market, so that the investor look at them as worthwhile to invest, right? So what does that mean? Means we can't just look at the users. We need to look at what the investors are thinking, what the investors are um, seeking from all of the similar business out there. So yeah, but how can we ask a question? Is like, how can we use the minimum viable investment in order to achieve that quality that the investor is looking at without having to waste too much time? So if they're spending a lot of money on the app, I mean, we all know that thing is going to take too long time. Well, unless it's like super fast AI or whatever. I haven't done any AI app, so I can't comment on that. But that's a lot of money, which is going to take a long time. So have we validated that this is absolutely what we need in order to get funding? If not, can we, validate it in a different way? So that's where design can come in. But at the same time, if the designer can't think about what the business need, they wouldn't be able to suggest that, because their intention is like, I want to get paid. I want to get design out there. I want my design to look good. It's rather shallow sometimes, but if you think about, just get rid of that whole, I want my design to look good in the market, and then really think about it from the stakeholders' perspective, you will come up with a lot more close to alignment kind of suggestions. And that will always position you as someone that's worthy of trust and worthy of being partnership with, rather than just getting paid to do a design. And it's a long game. It's a long-term game, right? It's not just you deliver a design done by. It's more like I want to give you the best suggestion so that this relationship continues going. Yeah. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer for such a simple. But then I feel like this question is so big, though.
It is. It is a broad question. I think you answered it eloquently, though, Jacqueline, and so many things to unpack from this. But the one thing I really want to kind of hone in next on is you mentioned there about, you know, designers, and I've seen this as well, right? Designers do get in their comfort zone. They focus sometimes way too much on maybe the user or making things look good when we talk about UI and things like this, is this kind of what um, sparked you to think about your course? Because obviously your course is about being more strategic thinking more about the business, and even a designer in that startup environment that you mentioned there, they don't need to use their design thinking skills necessarily just to make things look good, right? They could be helping to define that strategy to get those investors as well, right? Was this kind of, this thinking, is this what sparked you to do your course?
No, actually, the transition for myself used to be a designer, and I used to be talking about all the design slogans when I used to present design ideas to senior stakeholders. Back then, working as a full-time designer, I'll be like, look at all this customer journey mapping we did, all of this interview we did, and here's the prototypes and stuff, all of these customer problems. Oh my god, like we're empathizing with them, da da da. But I feel like back then it was never being taken seriously, and now ever since I run the business, I'm like, no one, can I swear? It's not really swear anyway. No one cares about the customer journey. No one cares about all of these design jargons you put out there. Everyone just cares about what you do is going to help them moving the needle. So if you don't know what the needle is, then it's our responsibility to find out what that needle is. Otherwise, we're just shooting bullets in every direction. A lot of the time, I also feel that designers use a lot of this jargon. It's actually, frankly speaking, trying to justify their existence as a job. A little bit, right? Like brutally putting that, because I feel like, because I was the same, because I feel like I know all of this. I know all these like workshop techniques, journey mapping, research technique. Of course, these are all important. But when we're presenting it back to the stakeholder, we don't have to explain to them how we do our job. We just need to explain to them how what we do is actually going to align to their goal. So there's a huge missing piece that most designers left out in their pitch, in their presentation, trying to get buy-in. But meanwhile, they're complaining about not getting buy-in. So there's a gap, right? So business founders or business partners is like, I don't have time to teach designers. Okay, so that ended up being, I just want to tell you what to design faster. And designers like, oh, why do you just keep telling me what to design? That's really unmotivating. And they're trying to suggest what's good for the user, what's good for the business. So these two parties are kind of like not talking to each other enough. But I think it's designers' responsibility. The empathy needs to expand to stakeholder. Just use 50% of your empathy or whatever energy you have for the users. Spread it out. Understand the business founder. Understand every single business functions, right? What does sales team do? What does marketing team do? What does customer service do? What does finance do? All of this is working mechanism to make the business possible. And business at the end of the day, depending on the business model, of course, but they want to generate revenue. They want to generate profit. Are they focusing on growth? Are they focusing on retention? Are they focusing on getting investment? Like, so if the more you understand about the end goal and the more you understand how everyone works together, it's easier for you to craft winning pitch, easier for you to tell the story that actually resonate with all of these people who are supposed to be helping you. So why don't we just help them help us? That anyone recognize this movie? Right, Tom Cruise, help me help you. It's basically that.
Yeah, and look, I think I really resonate with all the things you were saying there, Jacqueline, and especially about the stakeholders, and I think that's an area that sometimes I've seen, designers that I've worked with in the past not really putting a lot of focus on that. They almost like leave it to the product managers to manage those stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
Are these things that you kind of cover in your course? Is it like, can you tell us a bit about it actually, and how, you help designers become more strategic with things like this that you mentioned, like the stakeholders and other things like this?
Yeah, so my course is actually a condensed version. So currently the course is on Maven. I don't want to make it too long because it's kind of like really, there's a lot I want to share, but 4 weeks, I want to make sure that it's like very holistic. And the goal of it is not like, oh, I'm going to 4 weeks later, I'm going to become the best business designer out there. Like realistically, you need time to brew that knowledge into your day-to-day. So the course covers 4 key areas, and it's on a holistic level of a design career, strategic design career. So first, I started with a foundational level business knowledge for designers to understand their business partners, how business make money, different stages of business, what do they need at different stages. How do you consider this into your design when you're working in an organization at different stages? And then there's a big part, which is one of the, based on experience, most student gets a whoa moment. It's the moment when I share them the framework on how the business break down their strategic approach for different departments. Then we all know opportunity tree, right? Teresa Torres's framework. Teresa Torres framework is a product level, which is already been informed by the business direction. So that sits on the product level. So that's still a top-down kind of exercise. With that being said, I just want to pause here and I say the opportunity tree model needs to be challenged. And I will write a big blog about this because at the end of the day, this framework is designed by a product manager, right? So me as a designer, I want to challenge this framework, and I can talk about that later if that's any interested. But lastly, I talk about how to consider whatever the designer do in the numbers sense. It's hard, but it's much easier if you do the practice day to day. Then finally, how do we use winning framework to communicate all of these things back together to go, this is what we need to do. This is the outcome we want to achieve for all of us. It's about alignment. It's about the common goal we're getting together. And this is why we need to invest into this. But this is also like opportunity for designers to not only practice their business thinking, but practice their storytelling skills, which I think so important. If you don't get the communication right, nothing else matters. Like nothing else absolutely matters. That's absolutely 50% of the winning ingredient. So I think another beauty of this live cohort is every week is different, but every week there's assignments, so students need to do it. I also do the assignment, so they can see my approach. I also do this ridiculous thing. All the teacher from Maven thinks I'm crazy. I offer unlimited one-on-one. So like no one walks away having questions in my mind, because at the end of the day, it's all about the I want to provide 10 out of 10 experience, right? So I think it's every single cohort, I can only take maybe 15 to 20 people because I spend so much time on every single student. And I wanted to experience at the end of it, that transformation, and which has been quite life-changing for me to hear some of the feedbacks coming up from the students. So for example, I had a designer who in the previous cohort who graduated already. She just messaged me the other day. She goes like, I am actually going through an interview with like the public company. They're public, right? So I often suggest people when people are going through public company, one of the things that you could do to set yourself apart from others is to really get to study their financial reports and their annual reviews. Because public company by law, they have to publish this on their investors website. So for that designer actually spend time to study the company's past performances and the proposal that the company is going forward for their investors. By reading this, she's gone to the interview with a much better position than any other designer because she's done the homework that other people wouldn't have thought about to do. So that was the little message that she sent me. She goes like, if I didn't take the course, I would never thought about doing this. So she got the praise from the hiring manager. The way that you structure your pitch based on business case from the financial report was like quite outstanding. So that to me is music to my ears. And another thing I love is there are so many boring business courses out there. Let's be honest, right? Like there's so many boring ones. So I want to create something that's fun. I want to make learning business fun. And And I think this year, I've spent so much time recording and working with my editors to come up with cool ideas and fun interactions to craft this material. I actually had quite a few these students from this cohort sending me message going, I never thought learning business could be so fun. The content's great. That to me, it's like everything. That my job is done. So yeah.
Now, this sounds like an amazing course, and it's definitely something which, you know, I'm sure many people listening would be kind of interested in, kind of embarking on that journey. But I do want to zoom out a little bit, right? Because a lot of what you've said makes perfect sense in terms of like when you're in the room and you can, you know, you've got that level of kind of credibility and influence to kind of really be a part of that strategic planning and stuff. There's a lot of companies, well, a lot of design teams out there that they're not even getting invited into the room, right? So when strategy is being discussed for, you know, the next year ahead, their product counterparts are forming those strategies, right? And then speaking with senior leadership and about what they're going to do next year. But design is more so of like an afterthought, right? They're not at that table. They're not having these discussions as part of the planning, but they are being asked to execute on the strategy. So like so what can designers and design leaders do to, you know, get a true seat at the table, you know, and I guess kind of gain the respect kind of their kind of counterparts when it comes to strategic planning and business?
Yeah, so I think first thing to really consider is what stage of the business they are at, because we can't expect every single company suddenly just become design led and suddenly just become, oh my God, you know, designers every single seat. Like it's unrealistic to think that way. So I would start by first investigate what does strategy thinking mean for that particular company. That's super important. Because sometimes, for example, at a startup level, sales and marketing is everything a lot of the time. It's 80% of the money where they invest the money in. So maybe design can play a role to support those efforts to amplify sales and marketing impacts for the company at that stage. Where a company, let's say a very traditional company, has been going on for ages, like 20 something years, a bank, let's say, a traditional bank, which they have their own way of working. And some might describe those traditional way of working as like top down. So in this scenario, it's very hard for one person to try to change the way of working. And this is a common challenge for many designers comes to my course. They're like, how can I influence this in this scenario? So my suggestion, this is the best lesson I've learned. I forgot where I learned it from, but trying to influence slowly. I'm just going to pause that and repeat that. Influence slowly means if you go into anywhere and trying to change things just because you learned this new framework from whatever book or podcast or something and go, oh, I heard this is a great framework. Let's practice this. I mean, that's probably a recipe to fail at the beginning. So this got to do with your interpersonal skills, communication skills, and really rigorously think about how to implement this in a strategic way in terms of firstly, ask who do I need at my corner in order for me to experiment. I like to use that word, experiment this framework first, right? And so you identify the people around you who has a bit more influence in the company already and who are more open to change. So those are the quality that I would normally and I would build relationship with them to learn what would make a successful pivot in terms of like strategy or ways of working, etc. Then slowly plan out thinking, is the process I'm going to propose actually suit this company or not? Because I feel like a lot of designers miss that step and they just bluntly going in and go, let's do this because so and so said this in that book. It must be good, right? It doesn't suit every company. So at the end of the day, it's never, this is my favorite quote, it's never about getting buy-in. It's never. It's if you're thinking about getting buy-in, it's almost like immature thinking. It's always about helping the company make the best decision at the time. It's always like that. Give you an analogy. If I go shopping with my best friend and I was like, oh, I want to buy this black dress. And they were like, okay, Jack, you already have 156 black dress. You don't need another one, right? That's what a true friend would do. She doesn't just go, yeah, buy it. Yeah. Like, so over time, if this true friend is going to tell me what's best for me, I'm going to trust this person. It's the same thing with design's role in a business. Tell what the business is best for them, but you can't do that unless you understand them. So let's spend some time to understand them.
And Jacqueline, I think the relationship building is such a crucial one as well, right? Because when you have those relationships, it gets you that buy-in as well, right? Because if you've got a strong relationship with, like, I don't know, like the chief marketing officer or the head of marketing, they're gonna be like, hey, where's Jacqueline? Why is she not in this conversation? Or why have we not considered bringing her into this? I think, yeah, the relationship building is key. And like you said, it takes time to build those relationships, right? So you do have to go slowly. Yeah.
And
And
the
Jacqueline,
trust only be gained if you do something to make that whoever person that you're talking to's life easier. That's the only way. So at the end of the day, I feel like business is very much like the bottom line behavior that our mom used to teach us when we were babies or little. Give and take. It's the art of give and take. If you want that person to trust you, use your design power to make their life easy first, whatever that means. Maybe you're like, okay, I'm in a meeting. I heard this marketing manager said something about pushing out this campaign. So in that meeting, I'm gonna shut up. I'm not gonna interfere and start coming up with ideas. That's not the best approach. Best approach will be slowly going, oh, I heard this person say something about this idea. Maybe I'm gonna help them maybe prototype it quickly. And this way they can use the prototype, which is now my superpower, my design superpower. I bring my design superpower to support them. So next time when they present this idea to CEO or whatever, they have artifacts to show how exactly it works. Suddenly you're building relationship that way. So I think that's what I mean by influence slowly, right? It takes time to maybe understand them. Then they trust you. Then they will start to involve you. But firstly, you need to be kindly socializing the idea that you're really interested to be involved in strategic talk to your manager, to your product manager, and go, this is actually my career development, and I really would love to expand that knowledge. Is that okay if I ask you questions sometimes, or if I'll be really appreciated if next time if you feel like there's a meeting talking about this topic, it'll be amazing if you let me be the bystand listener. See how it sincerely socialize the idea, but because human at the end of the day, they want to help you only if you ask sincerely. Yeah.
and look, Jacqueline, Jay mentioned about getting the seat at the table.
Hmm.
Once you get that seat through some of the methods that you mentioned, it's important to keep it as well, right? How do you
Yeah.
make sure that you keep a seat at that table?
Oh God. I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant about this whole getting a seat at a table talk in terms of maybe sometimes designers to obsess about that idea. Feel like what does it mean for you as a person? Doesn't mean that everyone needs to go there, you know? And some designers probably don't enjoy to be in that position, and that's fine. Um, I think at the end of the day would mean you have contribution to some sort of strategic direction. That's what it means. And that contribution is, again, it's a slow process of showing that you understand the business. You're always thinking what's the best for the business, what's best for your team, what's best for your product. And if you continue to do that, you will have influence and people will want to work with you because you make their life easy. Yeah, that's the bottom line. Making people's life easy. Be a high performer. um, think bigger than design. Their world is so like everything is interconnected, right? Learn about financial movements outside of the company, in the industry. What is the market trend looks like? All of this knowledge can only help you to think about how you make decision for that particular product in that particular industry. And this knowledge doesn't mean that your PM or your business founders are aware of, but they would be really grateful if someone in the team actually mentioned about this as well. So be the player, be the complementary part that they need in order to get their get their job done better. So I think that would be my approach: is constantly be the best support in order to get the trust. Yeah.
I'm hearing a theme here, which is ultimately, like, to kind of make it extremely simplified, is just be helpful.
Yes.
Like, understand who your colleagues are, and know what their business actually is, and just be helpful
Mm,
to kind of help everyone to kind of achieve their
mm,
goals. And I do also kind of agree with the kind of whole seat at the table thing. It's something which I've experienced as a design leader from a lot of team members, kind of within the design organization, always going on about, we need a seat at the table, seat at the table, seat at the table, not understanding that that's not probably the most important challenge to solve right now. And maybe, going back to your point, it's more so about, what are you bringing to the table, right? So, like, are you
yes.
bringing that knowledge, are you bringing that guidance? Do you generally care about the business direction, and can you actually contribute something to it? And I think naturally, you be invited to the table, once you've kind of done that influence. But I think one thing that I've noticed is that people want to knock on the door of the room where the table is and just be expected to be, invited in.
Mm,
And kind of my advice is, like, you have to influence, right? So that might take 12 months,
yeah.
but you need to kind of really show what you're actually bringing. So I thought that was kind of quality advice there. You mentioned something which was extremely interesting to me as well, which was that you have to be a strong player. And we had another guest, Felix Lee, who's the founder of kind of ADP List, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
came
Felix.
up, yeah. So he was talking about this kind of idea of, like, A players and B players, and I just wanted to understand, like, from your standpoint, as you mentioned it, like, what would you say is, a kind of superstar, or kind of like an A player? Because you mentioned that you need to be like a strong, kind of team player. So how do you become one, or what qualities do you need?
I love this question. This is one of my biggest obsession. I've constantly, ever since 10 years ago, I've kept like a little journal. And every single time when I work with someone that's really good, I started to write down what they did really well that make everyone sort of have that admiration to their approach. And I think it all comes down to on the top of my mind is two most important things. Firstly, is that they create clarity. It's such a simple word, but it carries so much weight in that word. So many people like to over explain things. So many people like to overcomplicate things. So many people find it hard to succinctly summarize things. But A players kept it super clarity for everybody. They work together. They are able to document everything super succinctly. So me as an ADHD person, when I read their summary, I don't feel exhausted. It's an art, you know. They're able to present things, which is communication, which is my second point. They're able to communicate things in a way that brings people on the journey. They don't just tell you what they think, what they know. They bring you on the journey. That's a superpower. Um, I feel like these two would probably, I would just stop there. And I think if anyone can nail these two, they are already at least 50% ahead of everyone else. Actually, if I may add one more, A players think 3 steps ahead at least. 3 steps ahead. Yeah. And I can give an example is, for example, The other day I put on a LinkedIn post, and I have this feeling about a lot of designers are short-sighted in terms of networking, idea of networking. They feel like networking is going to an event, connect with someone. Oh, what's your LinkedIn? Okay, well, add it. Hey, thank you. Nice to meet you. Bye. They think this is networking. That's short-sighted. That's one-step thinking, right? So the 2, 3 step thinking, it's starting to be really kind to everyone you connect with. Every message you receive, you reply. Every single, treat people with respect. It doesn't matter what their status are, because this is a long-term relationship building thing. Eventually, someone is going to remember how you treat them, and if someone hear about like a job referral or something that needs you, the type of designer, they will think about you because you make an impression in their life. So I feel like think 3 steps ahead. It's always the kind of quality that I would look for when I interview someone or partnership with someone. It's kind of obvious when people think a little bit narrow field versus those who think long term, so long term thinkers are strategic players in many ways in life.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think also just on that point, on kind of networking, right? So we do know that a lot of kind of creatives are also introverted as well.
Yeah,
There are a lot that are also extroverted, but um, there are a lot that kind of struggle with that whole kind of networking, being in that kind of environment. What would be your advice? Because there's a ton of meetups happening, right? And like everyone enjoys these meetups, everyone enjoys going, right? But not everyone
yeah,
is comfortable approaching someone or a group of people who are already in a conversation. Like,
yeah.
what's the best way to intro yourself in a non, I guess, embarrassing kind of way?
But you know what, I think, like, firstly, I don't think networking is only this in this like in-person events. That's just one way of networking. But if you're in that environment, I feel like design industry in general, like product industry in general, every week I would think about, I'm so grateful that I'm in this business because everyone is so kind. Everyone truly is so kind. And ever since pandemic, you know how the whole shutdown thing and ADP list happened, I was the one of the first mentor to get onto the Excel sheet. When Felix set out the Excel sheet, that moment I realized you don't need to be in person. Everyone is super passionate to support each other. And so yeah, so I think I would encourage everyone to think networking is so much bigger than just going to events. If that's not what you feel comfortable about, there are many ways to make connections. And so here is a few example. This is my little strategy. I every single year I look at the bubble of environment that I'm in. So family, business, my job and the friends that I have, right? So I trying to imagine myself elevate above this bubble and think, you know, is there a different type of people that I need to hang out with? Is there maybe I need to expand my circle a little bit, right? Sometimes I look out and I was like, okay, it's too many designers. And I'm like, okay, so now this year I would make extreme effort to expand my reach to maybe I want to talk to people who's in the financial department. I want to take sales strategy courses. I also want to maybe enroll myself into improv classes because I think all of this additional thing is what makes a designer, it's what gives designer that MSG that other designer doesn't have. Do you know what I mean? So I would encourage everyone to zoom out. Then I would approach and I'll do research on who is the people in this different category that I want to be closer proximity with. Like the art of proximity is real. If then I would start following them on LinkedIn for a start, because every time you show up digitally, it's so also like a little tap on the shoulder. Hey, I'm here. I'm gonna here to support you. And I always come from I want to support you kind of perspective. If I follow someone and I love their work, love their podcast, I will give them 5-star review. That's a little tap on the shoulder because Again, change the position. If I was the one that's creating podcast, one 5-star review to me, it means the world. So I want to be that person to give that person the world. If that's such a simple act, it costs me 20 seconds, but it's going to give that person so much love and so much attention. So slowly you're building your presence around this new group of people, and they're going to recognize you, right? Don't just read people's content and become a consumer, become a contributor. Help them shape their presence, help them achieve their goal. So eventually they might notice you. And slowly, again, influence slowly, this is the networking becomes a little bit friendly for introvert. It's kind of like after you become a little bit more obvious on their in their circle, digital circle, you can then send them a message going, I really love this content that you did about XYZ, and I've learned so much about this. Then again, you're building credibility. So slowly you could become, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You might be going, I want to have a interview, I want to have a webinar, and I feel like this person I want to interview and bring them into my webinar. I've already spent a whole year building that networking relationship. And this person already know me. And I've contributed so much into their LinkedIn posts, commenting on it, sharing the content. By the time you ask this person to appear in your webinar, it's like an instant. It's the same deal in everything in life, I feel like.
Yeah. And Jacqueline, the one thing I also noticed about when you talk about that networking, it's also important, like you said, to really broaden that horizon. It shouldn't just be designers, right? And I think a great example I could give is I think in a couple of previous roles, where the finance manager, right? This is someone that usually designers wouldn't need to speak to. But actually,
Yeah.
yeah, just having like I networked with that guy, had a couple of conversations, and I realized or found out that there was this whole tooling budget which wasn't being
Yes.
used. And it's like, wow, we can actually use this to kind of get some more tools and come and put those into the team. And it's like, hadn't I not have done that networking with someone that I shouldn't really be networking, maybe on paper shouldn't network with, I wouldn't have been able to kind of found that budget.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I think that it's that little light in you going, I'm curious. So if you start your annual planning come New Year 2025 and fill in this sentence, I'm curious about blah, blah, and you just filling in the whole 10 curious, whatever that is, right? And then starting to enable yourself the opportunity to learn this area that you're curious but got nothing to do with what you do. You'll be so surprised that the world has so much interconnected elements, and a lot of this is going to help you. So for example, um, when I ran my business, of course I have to do accounting, right? I have to learn accounting. I mean, that to most designers is like absolute nightmare. Are you crazy? I didn't even know how to use Excel sheet before I run a business. Now I need to do all of this, like forecast, all of this thing. Of course, I have to learn from scratch. But a few years later, once I'm getting a hang of it, I'm like, oh, this is how you can play with numbers. See, accounting is actually not boring. It's actually a lot of strategy in there, So unless I didn't never know unless I get into the weeds of it. So now I know how that can be flexible and playful. I can almost use that knowledge into whatever project that I do. Perhaps I can think about how if I dial down one thing, I can increase another thing, because the world of business is all about leveraging different numbers, right? So it kind of gives me that leeway and bargain power now that I know accounting in and out. Not definitely do not come and ask me accounting questions. Not qualified for that. I can just have the very basic knowledge, and I have my accountant. That's why I hire them.
And look, Jacqueline, we spoke a couple of times actually on this discussion so far about introverts, designers being introverts, right?
Mm.
Do you think that's a myth, or do you think it's like a comfort zone that designers are kind of coming into? Because I say that because, on your course that you do, you said that there's been a lot of success stories about how you kind of transform designers to be more strategic, be more outgoing. Do you believe, in your opinion, that designers are genuinely introverts, or is it just we haven't tapped into our being that is more extrovert?
Well, I actually don't think whether introvert extrovert matters, and I think that's often a barrier that they put in themselves, the blocker that they put in themselves. I've met some of the best designers that are introvert, and I can really break down all their superpower. Extroverts think when they talk at the same time, right? So they think and talk at the same time. It is like an ongoing thing. But introvert, they listen. By the time they talk, it's already been summarized. So that is a superpower. Excuse me. So I feel like a lot of designers are introverts, but um, if they don't need to force themselves to be extrovert, I feel like the only way that the way that they introverts collaborate with people is really skillful, but they will the one thing that they need to do is need to communicate to their team in order to give them some space, because a lot of extroverts doesn't know how to work with introverts properly. So I feel like the introvert designers would be really helpful for the introvert designers to create a some sort of how to work with me. This is how you can best utilize my skill set or something for their teams. But some of the best leaders in the best design leaders I've worked with, they are all introverts. So I actually don't think that should be a blocker for anything. In fact, they should totally utilize that as a superpower.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it is definitely internalized, like you said, right? I think it's something
Mm,
that maybe we put that barrier up for ourselves, right?
yeah,
To kind of go into that bit of comfort zone. Um, and yeah, Jacqueline, just in terms of your course as well, you like we said, you've seen a lot of success stories of designers kind of changing and getting better with being more strategic. What do you recommend in terms of if I as a designer wanted to take this course,
yeah.
is there a real, like, who would you recommend are the best people to kind of pick it up? Do you think it's more for managers? Do you think it's more for
Mm.
designers just to broaden their skills? Who are your ideal people that you would suggest to take this course?
Yeah, so I would say maybe senior in a level where they feel like they are already maxed out their craft skills and they feel like they want to get to the next level. And that is the shift, really, because a lot of the time when you hit the craft ceiling, you either stay and be crafty and be really good at Figma, all of that stuff, or you can seek out multiple different pathways for you to explore and be able to take your design career to the next level. And learning business doesn't just, it's not just I want to become a strategic designer. That's just one way of looking at it. I actually feel like it's a life skill because it trains you to look at what the way I teach it is like you look at the whole world of movements and trends and market trends. All of these elements inform any business. So it almost trains you to become almost like you can go into become a growth designer. So there's like more specific roles on like designer that's focusing on growth. That would be really awesome opportunity because you need to learn like more business acumen than just a craft designer. And there are strategic designer roles who help business explore different also growth opportunities. So growth and strategic designer, it's kind of like similar in a way, but strategic designer probably a little bit more end to end. And then you can then also eventually, let's say if you run a business eventually, that opens up the door and gives you some sort of baseline foundation that guides you to where to think, where to look, and what do you need to know in order to pave the way towards that direction. So I feel like there's multiple different ways. I definitely think business knowledge is actually a lot of fun, and um, it's I just really think if designers tap into it, it's just as fun as design. They don't know it yet, and so when they discover it, the possibility is endless. Really, yeah.
Yeah, and Jacqueline, I think another thing around that is the future of design, right? Because if we think about how processes are now becoming a little bit more automated, we're able to kind of spin up designs quite quickly with AI, potentially, Figma's helping with these things. It feels like, in my personal opinion, good to hear from you, but it feels like actually strategy is where the future of design is going, right? Because yeah, because I mean, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I always think that if you were being hired for what you do, they're not utilizing you enough. So people need to hire you for what you think. And what you think, it's beyond AI. We're human. So we tell AI what to do now, right? And so if you think broadly, your approach can be so much more versatile than many other designers out there. Um, so I feel like we need to trend how we think and not just how to use the tools, because tools can be automated. With that being said, I still think, people's quite amazing doing design systems. And I think I have a lot of admiration for the detail driven designers. I used to be one of them, and I still have a soft spot for that. But I think, yeah, I think we need to be hired for what we think, not what we do. And strategy thinking, big picture planning, this kind of thing will give us so much more leeway into the future.
Cool, thanks. And then, yeah, I think you know, one of the areas that I always kind of think about as well when we talk about the future of design, like we said, the strategy is going to be key. And then
Yeah.
it's also, like you said, if you want to kind of develop your skills as a senior, like you said, Jacqueline, like people kind of wanting to kind of make that next step, you do
Mm.
have to understand a bit about the business, right? Um, so do you also feel that, like, people that are looking to make that next step in their career are also like prime candidates to kind of rethink about that strategy?
Sorry, can you repeat the last bit again?
Yeah, do you still think that the people that are, looking to make that step in their next step in their career, um, would need to be a bit more business minded and look more into the strategy that you are kind of teaching in your course?
Yeah, I feel like it's a definite step. Yeah, it's a definite step that's bound to happen, because where designers with business acumen are usually likely to be perceived as more valuable in terms of what they can contribute to the business. So I had many students sign up to the course, and I had a question of, like, why did you sign up to the course? What was your biggest challenge? And one of the many designers would write, they're at the senior level, but they were made redundant in the recent years, especially this year. And the feedback was, we are actually looking to hire someone that's a little bit more strategic. So in the this is future proofing your career, because when financial crisis happen, when business is challenged by the choice that they have to make, they must be really selective on how much money they pay for who. And so the more skills you can cover, the more likely you're going to be useful for that kind of economic situation, right? So imagine this: if I'm a business founder and I start a company, and time is money, and within this time, I want to push out as much as possible. I can spend 120K, hire a designer. Um, but most designers focus on users and design in that spectrum, because they're the representation of that area. But this type of designer often needs a lot more work for that business founder to support, because then I will need to tell them, oh, well, this is not quite right. Maybe, or eventually I'll just tell them what to design. That's easier. But then if I spend the money to hire someone that thinks on the behalf of the business to balance what they already know with user and all the user research skills, this person can save me so much more headache, because then I can then almost assume this person can think in towards the business step without me having to tell them. So that would save me time and effort. So with these two cases right next to each other, it's kind of obvious that learning business acumen it's it's a no-brainer, to be honest. But I would not say, I wouldn't comment that people designer who love focus on UI, it's not going to succeed. No, no, that's definitely not what I mean. I think every area has their own specialties and skill sets. But why not putting another feather on your head?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and that was definitely like a turning point in my career. So like
Yeah.
I kind of done like a business master's, and going back to what you said earlier, like you found out how accounting is actually really creative.
Yeah.
Then once you understand that, and you understand it's all about balancing the books
Yeah.
ultimately, right? So like what can you do to kind of create more balance across the organization? How do you translate that into how can design play a role in doing that? The
Yeah.
conversations that you start having with your kind of counterparts in the team and also leadership become completely different, right? They become a lot less subjective and more kind of meaningful, right? More focused on like driving the value. And it's easier for stakeholders to then connect what you do to the business results as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's like super important. Like,
Yeah.
if there's people who are curious to kind of explore this, but maybe they're not ready to take a course like your course, what would you advise them to do, like in terms of dabbling before try before you buy, in a way?
Yeah, of course. And I mean, of course, the course is on the higher price point. I completely understand. But firstly, I would suggest trying to just zoom out and see how much time is spent on design related content versus anything else that's happening in the world, right? And if you think it's too much design content, well, there's time to adjust that scale. We all have 24 hours a day. It's your choice to decide how much time you want to spend on what. So the second thing I would say is to listen to podcasts or read books that's kind of like business related, CEO interviews, that type of RAM. So that's how I started. I started to read everything about. I'm a little bit extreme though. So that's when I started like 10 years ago. I was like, okay, I'm gonna put. This is how I did it. I'm like, I'm gonna put $2,000 in the stock market. And I'm going to choose the company to invest, right? That money to me is not short term. It's like I don't just make money. I actually invest because I know it's not my own money, so I need to watch what I'm doing. And therefore that forces me to learn about those companies' performance. So I think about long term. This is my education about how business works. So I then force myself to learn about these companies that I choose and follow their journey. Think about why they did this in quarterly reports. And slowly I get so much more interest because now it's my money in the mix, right? That's how I started it. And I started to read about, in the stock market, you can see a lot more about how market moves. Everything started to connect together. I was like, wow, this is so interesting. The United States presidency could impact financial numbers in different countries. Then that impacts, what different country can choose what they produce to protect their important export numbers. Then this number will then connect to an auto, a different industry, make them decide what they do as a business. And then you look at a human trend, human behavior trend, and go, that trend is going to impact our industry. So a company can't just look at themselves. They must look at all aspects of the world in order to connect that strategic dots. That to me is so interesting, and I can never get sick of it. I can never imagine 10 years ago that now every morning I would read news about finance, read news about business movement. I think I'm a crazy person. But I absolutely love it. I highly suggest everyone start there. It's free. Start there.
Yeah, and there's lots of resources, like you said, online, right? Loads of podcasts. There's lots of
Yeah,
the news is heavily related to it as well. So it's easy to
yeah.
get into. Mm.
Yeah, but then think rigorously about how these things connect, and don't just. I think one of the thing I learned when I was in uni, one of my professor used to say to me, "Don't ever just become a consumer. You have to become a thinker a creator. So every time you consume something, don't just consume. Think about how this happened, why this happened, how this connect to everything else. The more you do that, the more you're going to become a bit more aware of the different movements in your world. And always be the creator, like if you feel like you have something to say or wanted to make an impact, create. Don't just consume. So I think that motto kind of stick with me all of these years, and I'm forever grateful.
Yeah. And just Jacqueline, just also speaking a bit more about, what's going on in the world and some of the support you've been doing for education in West Africa. Can you tell us a bit about that and how it
Yeah.
all came about?
This is when I started the fashion business, fashion label. I didn't want to just have a brand. I didn't just want to have a business. I want something. I want something else that's going to make me wake up every single morning. I feel like I'm making a difference, right? So again, it's like I think about what kind of impact I want to make and I craft my own opportunity to achieve that impact. No one give me the opportunity, right? So then that was the starting point. And then I thought, you know what, it's so resonating with me. Every one of us have a soft spot for something that we're passionate about. And why is this passion my passion? It's that I didn't come from a privileged country. I didn't come from a privileged background. I was born in South China back in the days, well, way back. If a family had a choice to send one kid to school and they must choose between a boy and a girl, the boy is always going to get that opportunity, right? Back in the day. And so, of course, time is very different now, which is a fantastic thing. Everyone gets equal. But I'm passionate about gender equality. And what was that quote? Someone, I think was like Gandhi or something, said, if you educate a woman, you educate a whole family, you educate a whole village. And that it's actually really resonating for me. And so I'm all about partnerships. So because I can't do everything on my own. So I would choose a non-profit organization that's focusing on that specific area. I like the fact that they're more focused because then they share all of the information about that one area, that how many schools that they're building, how many girls that's been, impacted, or outcomes of their work. And so I decided to make a commitment that every single garment I sell, I will have a one portion of profit that's going into that educational system that these nonprofits building. And over time, it's the kind of nonprofit that keeps in touch with you and tell you all of this impact and stuff that you help to contribute. Of course, it's not just me, millions and other people that's also contributing. And I felt like I was part of something much bigger. And I think that is forever like a motivation point for everything else that I wanted to do. That started with that whole West Africa girls sending girls to school to now building the course. It's another impact that I wanted to create. And I think, I'm about to press the scale button. Yeah. But at the moment I'm still on the on the validation side and improving like slow. But yeah, we're getting there. I have a lot of confidence that it's gonna make good in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it will, and anything you can do to support is always gonna, drive a massive impact for someone somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I always think that whatever value that you give out to the world, it will always come back to you in tenfolds. It will always, some way or some form, someday. So never hold
Absolutely.
back. Always give. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, Jacqueline, I think we've kind of covered a lot of really interesting topics today, and I think it's been great having you on the show. And yeah, look, for anyone that's interested in finding you online, talking a bit about or taking your course, we'll
Mhm.
definitely put the links in the description. But is there anywhere else they can find you, or any websites you want to plug, or anything?
Oh, they can always follow me on LinkedIn because I post a lot on LinkedIn. It's just more like, nuggets that I feel once in a blue moon, I'll post on it. I talk a lot about I talk about authenticity, being yourself, how to build your influence, and also how to just, you know, and also, of course, this like business designer kind of topic. But in general, it's a mix of lifestyle, life nuggets that I collected and the business design sort of knowledge that I shared in general. So LinkedIn is a good place to follow. Otherwise, yeah, sign up to the course. Oh, there is a discount code, isn't it, Warren?
Yes, I think Jacqueline will be offering 10% off for anyone that takes the course. So she's going to leave us with a code in the description. So take a look at that. If you are looking to take that course, if you are looking to be more business minded, grow your strategy, or as we spoke about today, if you're looking to make that next step in your career, it's a great course for you to kind of pick up. I was looking at the description of it, and yeah, some of the success stories look amazing, Jacqueline. So definitely one to watch, guys. 10% off in the description below as well. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope to see more designers make an effort to invest in your own career because it will always pay back for you.
100%. 100%.
Brilliant. Well, look, Jacqueline, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And you two have been fantastic interviewer. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.